Here we go. Roll video.
I think anybody creating something new must have an adventure.
It's not cinema, it's something else.
My advice to a young filmmaker is to make a movie every week.
The whole bag of movies can be learned in about a day and a half.
But suspense is essentially an emotional process.
You gotta make films. You gotta make it and get it seen.
Cinema for me is a world of when I dream.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Behind the Slate. I am your host, Aaron Strand. Oh my God, I'm so tired. I got a new baby at home. I got a film that's getting ready to go on a road show. I got another film in pre-production, and we're banging out more Behind the Slate live shows than ever before. It's an exciting time. I'm so happy that you joined me here on the Behind the Slate network, wherever you found me, on YouTube, on podcast, on Instagram, on TikTok. Instagram and TikTok, they've been really blowing up in the last couple months here. So if you've crossed over from seeing that content to maybe watching the full podcast on YouTube or something like that, I am so happy that you're here. You can be sure to check out a bunch of our older live shows. You can also check out like the OG shows from back in the day when I did, multi-part historical deep dives. I think those are really dope. I would still like to do those kinds of shows, but there's only so many hours in the day. And right now I got to do the things where I'm getting a little bit of cash, because this is the work that I love to do. And I want to be able to keep doing it for a long, long time. Today, I've got a recording from our September 25th recording of George Lucas's very first film, THX 1138. This show was kind of interesting. I'll be real, this show was later than our usual shows. It had a 9:30 p.m. start time. I had agreed to do this later show time so that the theater could squeeze in an extra preview screening of the 70mm print of One Battle After Another that they got. It was kind of like I was trying to be open to the experiment of this, maybe like trying to tap into some late night appeal, a little midnight movie vibe. THX 1138 is kind of I think it's got some midnight movie qualities. It's got some sex, it's got sci-fi kind of genre elements, and it's got the name brand of George Lucas. So I was hoping that maybe we'd get a good crowd out for that. But let's be real, it was the smallest turnout of the year. So, I'm just trying to be honest. I'm constantly trying to experiment and work on the programming and marketing of these type of events, and then ultimately use those lessons to cross over into my own filmmaking and really independent film distribution strategies. So this was a bit of an experiment, and I think certain things worked and didn't work. I think the majority of the crowd came out because of the George Lucas aura, the George Lucas mystique. Most people had never seen the movie before and came out to the show, which I think is really interesting because one of the weird things about doing repertory screenings is that a lot of people only come out for movies that they have seen before. So I think that was a real win in programming something that people came out, because of their familiarity with Star Wars, their love of Star Wars, and they wanted to see where it all started. And so they were really introduced into a new experience. And I was very encouraged that on the whole, people really responded to the film, really, really loved it. So that was really cool to see. This dynamic of how do you get people out to the theaters? How do you get butts in seats? It's hard, man. It's hard. I am not the master at it. I am not as good as others that I know. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to learn, this kind of alchemy of how to get a crowd out there. And, it's humbling, to say the least. But at the same time, these are things that the big studios are struggling with as well. So, I don't know. I put a lot into these shows. They really, really mean a lot to me. It's a huge part of my life at this point. And yeah, I get down when the crowd isn't as big as I would want it to be. That's the truth. So I kind of felt a little bittersweet coming out of this one. But I'm trying to just remember the fact that the people who did show up, they loved the movie and they loved the programming. And I think they got a lot out of the opening monologue that kind of contextualized this movie, because this movie is such an outlier within the entire body of work that George Lucas is known for. And so to kind of bring people into that story and introduce people that George Lucas really never wanted to have the career that he ended up having, at least originally, it's just such a fascinating twist of entertainment history. And so, I think that was really cool to see people responding to that. Now, as I mentioned at the top, we're kind of blowing up on social media. It's a little crazy. I've gained thousands and thousands of followers just in the last couple months, and it is really largely because of these goofy take videos that I've been doing. With people giving their hot takes. A video of me giving a hot take about Godzilla has gotten over a million views on Instagram, and then a bunch more on TikTok. And it's a little weird, it's I don't know how to reconcile this thing, because I do love these videos. All right. I like making these videos. I think it's fun content. And I do think it furthers the mission of the show. The mission of this show is about lowering the barrier of entry to classic and art house cinema. It's about creating the space for people to walk in to a theater, having never heard of the movie before, and being sort of taken along so that they're ready to see the film, as opposed to just being hit by something totally out of context, which I think can often be very alienating. And I hate that the legacy of sort of cinema culture has meant that a lot of this storytelling and a lot of this historical work has been sort of cloistered. It's been made to be sort of exclusive of if you don't know, this director who was inspired by this director from this cinema legacy, then you're really kind of left out of the film. And it's very hard to access these things that are not just in the traditional sort of Hollywood cultural storyline that we're sort of, at least Americans, are all indoctrinated into. So that's the core mission of the show. If the core mission is about lowering barriers of entry, then, it's also about creating space and lowering barriers of entry into cinema culture. And these hot take videos, to me, this is the type of conversations that we all dream of having in cinema lobbies. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to movie theaters by myself to see a movie that I wanted to see, and I wish that I had people to kind of, yuck it up with in the hallways of that movie theater. And so by doing these type of take videos, we're trying to create some of that culture and open a door for people to come and partake in it and have a little fun and, have a little laugh at the expense of some of these films and share their goofy opinions. Cause it's just really about having fun and not being super serious and super pretentious. I will say though, that some of the comments are super serious and super pretentious and frankly super mean. And I think I'm bringing this up mostly because a lot of them are directed at me, which is by design. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but I think part of my job as a host of this show is to kind of shield any guest that comes on to give a take and try to whatever criticism there is, direct it more towards my direction, as opposed to the guest who we want to, be respectful of. And hopefully I want them walking away feeling proud. But yeah, getting a bunch of mean comments said about you on the internet is lame. It does not feel good. It's hard to reconcile. I think this is just a part of reaching a larger audience, and it opens you up and engenders just a certain percentage of negativity and judgment that people feel entitled to. I don't know. Honestly, it makes me wonder sometimes if I'm doing this the right way. It makes me wonder if the result of the mission that I feel passionate about is actually landing. I hope it does. I would love to know from you, if you sort of see, if it's coming together for you, if you see the vision of sort of opening doors, lowering barriers of entry, and all these things hopefully working together to make that possible. Hit me up behindtheslatepod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, this got really introspective. Enough of my rambling. Let's get on to the live show from the movie. We're going to start with a little word from our fabulous lobby correspondent here at the Plaza Theatre in Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Peyton Johnson, talking to the crowd that came out to the show.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Peyton Johnson. Did you miss me? I'm back for another special showing at the Plaza here in Atlanta, Georgia with Behind the Slate podcast. It's THX 1138. Huge night for nerds. It's George Lucas's first ever film. Made it when he was 25, and it's exceptionally horny. As you can see, I'm in peak female sexy form. Fear me. Fear me in my giant sweatshirt. We're going to figure out if George Lucas is underrated or overrated. Have y'all seen this movie before?
No.
No,
No, I've not.
What made you come see it?
George Lucas.
Yeah.
I'm actually a Star Wars guy.
I've just been such a big fan of George Lucas ever since, really, I saw Jar Jar Binks.
Wow, Jar Jar is what did it for you. Ah! Look, it's my friend!
There's a guy that suddenly came and was like, what are you doing? It's like flirting with me. He wants to come to this.
I wonder if he's drunk and a pervert.
He said he liked my ears. That was concerning.
This is George Lucas's horniest movie. Do you think his other movies should be hornier?
We can go a bit. We can turn up the dial a little bit, maybe.
I think every movie should be horny, so yes.
I don't know how you could make them more horny, right? I mean, all Star Wars incest in those, not great. I'd go for less.
It's just a you thing.
I'm a fan, maybe a little less.
Fantasy in general is already horny. Space fantasy, there are horny elements. I mean, Leia's costume in Return of the Jedi, like, come on.
Actually, thinking about it, maybe they are kind of horny.
Han and Leia did have really good chemistry.
It could have been hornier for me, though. Did you know that George Lucas made this? This is his first film when he was 25. What did you do by the time you were 25?
Today's actually my 18th birthday.
Happy birthday. What are you going to accomplish by the time you're 25?
I'll probably make like 3 of these.
Easy. You're going to get, what, $700,000 from Warner Brothers tomorrow.
I mean, I got a while. It doesn't need to be tomorrow, but soon.
Have you seen his other works? Do you think they should be equally as horny?
I feel like I probably have. I'm bad with the names. Like, if you tell me a name, I'll probably like, oh, I've seen that.
Star Wars.
No.
George Lucas, overrated or underrated?
Overrated now.
Whoa, the deep breath is crazy.
I think now he's overrated, but it's kind of cool to see him a period where he was unheard of.
Way overrated.
I mean, it's Star Wars. I think you kind of have to say overrated. Wow. But I mean, I'm not saying it's bad.
I'm not a big fan of the prequel trilogy. I know that's like a little blasphemous now. I know, but I think we should take it back to the 2000s when people thought it wasn't that good, because I don't think it's that good, honestly. But the original trilogy, Raiders of the Lost Ark, just Indiana Jones, it's great. It's amazing. They're classics for a reason.
Hello, hello, hello. My name is Aaron Strand. Welcome to Behind the Slate Presents. Show some love. I know. It's late. I want to thank you all for coming out on a fabulous Thursday evening. And I would like to definitively state we're doing our later than normal time, not because we got bumped by PTA. It's because we wanted to get late night sexy with George Lucas. Am I right? Jesus Christ, I've fallen asleep already. Okay, if you've never been to a Behind the Slate show, the way this works is I get up here, I give a little historical crash course about the film, talking a little bit about the context of when it was made and how it was made to try to make the film come more alive. We then watch the movie, and then for those who can stick around, I know it's late, you probably got work tomorrow, but we're gonna do a little audience discussion anyway after the film to talk about what we just saw. I'm gonna hand the mic over to you. All this audio gets recorded and released on the Behind the Slate podcast feed and the Behind the Slate YouTube page later this week. So that's pretty cool. Real quick, I got a couple of announcements. First of all, if you like the programming that we do for Behind the Slate here in Atlanta, we are expanding. We're going and doing shows in Athens, Georgia at Cine, the fabulous indie theater out in Cine. So if you want to make the trip or you know anybody that lives in Athens, let them know. We got shows coming up on October 9th. We're screening Possession. And then on October 30th, the day before Halloween, we're screening The Thing. We'll be continuing and doing shows monthly out there, which is very exciting. And then for those of you, some of you may know, I am also a filmmaker. My debut feature film premiered here in this theater at the Atlanta Film Festival this past year called Withdrawal. Yes, thank you so much. Shout out to everybody who has seen the film. And I wanted to let y'all know that we're actually doing a free screening of Withdrawal over at the Terra Theater. We're doing it partnered with the American Addiction Recovery Association. It's going to be on October 23rd. So if you haven't seen the movie or you'd like to see it again, all you got to do is RSVP. It costs no money, and I'd love to see you out at the Terra Theater on October 23rd. Just shoot me a DM, and I'll send you the RSVP info. Okay, so let's get right into this. Tonight we are watching arguably one of the most influential films of all time. And not just influential because of the aesthetic, artistic choices, but also because the fallout of this film changed the course of entertainment history. Of course, I'm talking about THX 1138. Now, Yes, give it up. Yeah, give it up. Give it up. We're waking up slowly. We're waking up slowly. So to tell the story of this film, we got to start by talking about everybody's favorite nerd with two first names, Mr. George Lucas. George Lucas, he was born in Modesto, California in 1944. And Modesto was this sort of picturesque, quintessential town of Norman Rockwell Americana. And George Lucas absolutely fucking hated it. Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. He was a rebel. He was a race driver. He didn't like how his parents wanted him to take over the family business. He made the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs. Yeah, George Lucas is Luke Skywalker, just in case that hadn't clicked just yet. He wanted to be a race car driver, but a terrible car accident at the age of 18 made him change his mind. He goes to Modesto Junior College. He gets introduced to the films of Fellini, Godard, Truffaut, but really he falls in love with super weird avant-garde shorts distributed by a company called Canyon Cinema Co-op. This was a non-for-profit distribution company out of San Francisco that distributed all these super weird, really non-commercial short films, and George Lucas loved them. He loved them so much. He loved them so much that he decided to transfer to USC, one of the only colleges with a film program, to make shorts just like this. At USC, he fell in with a group of very talented but very self-important nerds that gave themselves the nickname the Dirty Dozen. And I'm sorry, I just got to come out and say it. That is not cool. Every book, every documentary about these guys talks about the Dirty Dozen as if they were badass. They were not. They were dorks, okay? Among the Dirty Dozen, you got writer-director John Milius. You had producer Howard Kazanjian, who would go on to produce Raiders of the Lost Ark and Empire Strikes Back. You had Randall Kleiser, who directed Grease. You had Caleb Deschanel, whose daughter Zoe would inspire millions of ukulele cover songs that would haunt a generation. And of course, you got Walter Murch, editor, sound designer, and writer. Now, like I said, it's so crazy that George Lucas, the man synonymous with commercial filmmaking, started off making the most uncommercial shit you could imagine. His early short films were these montage collages of images and noises designed to evoke emotion rather than tell a story. Now, in 1967, he completes his studies. He re-enrolls at USC as a grad student, and he takes a post teaching a class for a bunch of naval cadet documentarians. This was a job that was sort of looked down upon among the USC circle, but he did it because it gave him unlimited access to color film and processing costs. He used these resources to make a sci-fi short about a young man trying to escape a repressive environment, and he gave it the super marketable name of Electronic Labyrinth, THX 1138 4EB. He shot this with his crew of naval cadet students. They shot it on real locations. This was an interesting choice for the time because most sci-fi films at this time took place in these sort of ultra-curated aesthetic worlds where costume designers and set designers created a perfect vision of the future. But Lucas saw something that no one else really saw. He noticed that those Apollo capsules went up into space all nice and shiny. They came back burnt, dented, filled with candy wrappers and empty Tang bottles. He called this the used future. And it would come to define not only the aesthetic of THX 1138, but of course, Star Wars. Now, THX, the short film, was very successful. It won first place at the National Student Film Competition, and he won a scholarship from Warner Brothers. He could choose any Warner Brothers film to work on. He chose Francis Ford Coppola's big-budget musical Finian's Rainbow. Coppola, who at the time was 29, Lucas was 24, they quickly became fast friends, they're up all night drinking, and pretty soon they're talking about they want to start a company that made edgy, artistically driven films outside of the main studio system. Coppola encourages Lucas, you should expand THX into a feature. But Lucas, who really was just interested in technology and making these, weird montages, he was a terrible writer. He kind of always has been. So they brought in Walter Murch from the Dirty Dozen to finish out the script. Now, after the success of Easy Rider, the studios are looking any way to connect, to make youth-oriented films.
And Coppola uses this opportunity to pitch Warner Brothers on investing in his and George Lucas's dream company that they call, of course, American Zoetrope. Warner Brothers agrees. They agree to give him the startup costs of the company to open up an office in San Francisco. They agree to a 7-feature film slate, and they give them a budget of $777,000 to shoot the first film for American Zoetrope, THX 1138. Filming began in late 1969. Again, they shot in real locations across San Francisco. They used, outside of Donald Pleasance and Robert Duvall, they used all local actors. Everyone had to shave their head. For the extras, they used members of the local drug recovery group Synanon, whose members had to shave their heads anyway. And ironically enough, a few years after this film came out, Synanon devolved into an abusive cult, much like the government in the film. Lucas edited the film himself. And by 1970, he had achieved something that no one in Hollywood had really achieved since Orson Welles with Citizen Kane. He was a 25-year-old director who had made a studio-financed film with complete creative control. Francis Ford Coppola takes the cut down to the execs at Warner Brothers. He's so proud to show them this film. He puts it up on the screen, and they absolutely hated it. They fucking hated this movie. They demanded the working print. They took the film from Coppola and Lucas. They recut it, but they only took out 4 minutes of footage, which is really just like a fuck you edit, right? It's like not enough to change the story of the film. It's just enough to show you that they could. They then released the film in 1971, very little marketing, and it was received mixed to negative reviews. Worst of all, though, they demanded that Coppola return the investment money that they gave to American Zoetrope, saddling the young director-producer with crippling debt. This was the defining moment of both these artists' lives. Because of this, Coppola had to take a work-for-hire job, adapting a trashy but popular crime novel called The Godfather. Lucas was so disillusioned and hurt by this experience, he swore to never make an artistically driven film again. He was always going to make audience-friendly crowd pleasers, which led him, of course, to American Graffiti and eventually Star Wars. To this day, George Lucas has never worked with Warner Brothers, and he has always valued his artistic independence. When he was negotiating the deal for Star Wars, he did not accept a director's fee. Instead, he demanded complete creative control. He founded LucasArts, Lucasfilm, and of course, Industrial Light and Magic. Also, he would never be dependent on a studio ever again. We can look at THX, and even though it was panned upon release, it actually grew in importance. It went on to inspire films like Alien and Terminator 2 and The Matrix. And finally, George Lucas announced in the early 2000s that he and Walter Murch actually snuck onto the Warner Brothers lot. They stole back that work print. They put back the original 4 minutes of cut footage into the film. And of course, in very George Lucas fashion, he added CGI to complete his original vision. Now, before you roll your eyes and groan, I have to admit, I actually kind of like the CGI in this director's cut that you're about to see. I think it's kind of good. But most importantly, it does not stand in the way of what is the shining testament to George Lucas's raw and natural talent that would go on to change entertainment across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for George Lucas's best film. Yeah, I fucking said it. I fucking said it. His best film, THX 1138.
At this point, we watch the film. You can rent the director's cut of THX 1138, which is with all, George Lucas's added CGI and everything. You can rent that on all the streaming services. I don't think it's available as part of any of the streaming services right now. I think it's by rental only. Of course, if you are so lucky, like we are here in Atlanta with our wonderful video store, Videodrome, if you can make it to a local video store, rent their copy. There's a fabulous, the DVDs are fabulous. Some really good commentary tracks. I highly recommend the George Lucas, Walter Murch commentary track on the latest Blu-ray release. It was really, really good. I did also want to shout out that if you want to watch the original THX 1138 without the added CGI, it's currently available on Internet Archive. I don't really want to blow up that spot, but hey, it's there. Check it out. You don't see all the CGI. The quality's not the best, but it's a pretty cool historical artifact of cinema and really holds a lot of value. I don't hate the CGI in the new one. I really don't. But the old one, you know, I don't know. It probably is a little bit better. You can check that out on Internet Archive right now. Anyway, we watched the movie, but now for this show, we're going to fast forward to our audience discussion that took place after the film. By this point, it is like 11 p.m. at night. Everybody's feeling sleepy. It gets a little loopy, but I think we had fun. Check it out. If you have to take off, I hope you get home safe. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. For you late night folks sticking around, yes, thank you. Thank you. For you late night folks sticking around, we're going to open up the audience discussion in the same way we always do for Behind the Slate Presents, with a little thing that I like to call low letterboxed reviews. Okay, we've got low letterboxed reviews for THX 1138. Half a star. If you want to stare at a bright white screen and see emotionless people repeating nonsense phrases and doing nothing, this is the movie for you. Half a star. Reason 3,567,764,497,000,000 why I hate to let my boyfriend choose the movie. Half a star. I feel very let down. Sure, this movie can be thought-provoking, but it doesn't quite depict the emotion and lack of emotion you should feel for this idea, and you gotta give us some Duval Dong. Shout out for the Duval Dong. 1 star, the second most boring film I've ever seen. Was debating turning it off, but by that point, it was almost over. What was number 1? Second most boring? Okay, last one. 1 star. The dystopian concepts of blank white voids for living spaces and emotionally suppressed human beings make most scenes flatter than a pancake. Frankly, hack writing. I'm sorry, you cannot call something hack writing when you use the phrase flatter than a pancake. Not allowed. Not allowed. Okay, so let's open things up here. Does anyone want to give a response to the bored film bros of Letterboxd? Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Timothy. Feeling brave tonight.
I'll say yeah for the first part of it. Like, I think it took a little bit for me to get into it, but I weirdly found myself really like engaged in the last like half of it. Like when everything starts to like start coming down and they're actually trying to escape and they're getting in the cars and such. Like I don't know if you heard, but I actually audibly gasped when the car like just rammed into the pillar. I was like actually like really invested in the fact that you're getting these like super fast scenes of racing like down this like whatever it's called. I'm blanking on the term. I genuinely was engaged after that. So yeah.
Hell yeah. And you know that car crashing into the pole, that's like George Lucas's like nerd humor. Like he thinks that's so funny. In the same way that he talks about it in the docs about this movie, that scene where the droid police officer just like starts walking into the wall and George Lucas is like, yeah, we added that scene in for comedic value and Warner Brothers just didn't think it was funny. Okay, anybody else? At what point did the movie kind of lock in for you? Was it the car? Did it make it all the way to the car chases or were you locked in from the beginning? Anybody want to talk about the moment they were hooked or not? Yes.
Hi, everyone. So I think I'm just really appreciative this movie exists. It's kind of been like this sort of legend in my life, like THX, because it was before Star Wars, right? And what we know is like Star Wars depends on this very like traditional sort of like, I guess you could say, well, it's the Buck Rogers serials. It's like the stories that are going to make us feel good and like are kind of conventional and kind of lean on this like Joseph Campbell's heroes thing. Y'all know. But I think that what I appreciate about this and why it makes me happy is like before Star Wars, he didn't really care about that. He just wanted to create a really interesting visual story. And I really want like a lookbook for this film because all the shots in it are like really, really beautiful and like really striking on their own. And so I just appreciate that like he wasn't so focused on like this big rousing story because Star Wars does lean in that, and that's partially why I love it, because it really kind of like celebrates this idea of like the underdogs winning traditionally. But with this film, he's just like, I just want to make something really interesting visually. And I was saying it definitely feels like a student film because he was just trying stuff, you know, and I think a really good example of just like his genius early on. So I appreciate that.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. This film, yes, it's so brimming with idealism. And it really goes back, and like why I wanted to highlight in the opening monologue how George Lucas's film love was really inspired by these super avant-garde shorts distributed by Canyon Cinema Co-op. This whole movie is like George Lucas, he's like, if I could just show people how dope these shorts are, like everyone would see. And then you can see why his little artist heart was so hurt when they didn't see, you know, and like everyone kind of shot him down. How did everybody else feel about sort of these montages of images and sounds? What were some of the emotions that they brought up? Was it effective in that way? Yes. Oh, I can see it.
I think for me, I think for me, the images kind of like really immersed me in this like universe that we're supposed to be in. I have like auditory processing disorders. So like when there's like a lot of words in sci-fi films, I'm like, girl, you're speaking a whole different language. This is a different universe. Words mean different things. I don't understand what's going on. But I think I was able to enjoy this film because of how important the visuals were, because I didn't have to know what they were saying to understand who like their like religious idols were, or that they were like watching TV in the context of those. I think the visual cues really helped me kind of immerse myself and just be able to enjoy the film without having to like actually learn all the specific words and what they mean in this universe. Like it may be important to George and the writers, but for me, it would take me a few watches before I actually understand that. So I really enjoyed the visual aspects.
I love that you pointed this out. And this is actually this was intentional by the filmmakers. So what Walter Murch and George Lucas said to describe this film is, instead of a movie about the future, it was a movie from the future, right? They wanted this to feel as if it was a documentary that had been transported through time back into the past. And they also reference a lot of, in the way that Japanese cinema, the people just go about their Japanese lives and they don't feel the need to explain it to non-Japanese people. And it's one of the great qualities of Japanese film. Well, Lucas and Murch were so obsessed with this idea. They wanted these characters to be going about their lives, their rituals, their habits, without ever explaining it to the audience. And in fact, they were so inspired by Japanese film that Lucas used some of the investment money to fly to Japan and scout locations, because they thought about shooting it in Japan as in like an homage to this quality of film, but they didn't quite have the money to do it. So it was absolutely an intentional choice by the filmmakers. Now, when speaking also about the visual quality, I brought up in the opening monologue this idea of the used future. Did that really sort of strike anybody watching this film, and this sort of used, rusted quality of the look of this film, the set design, the aesthetic design? Yeah, right back here.
I think I saw the used future in like the factory industrial settings where the guy worked, but it kind of went away when it shifted into Speed Racer at the end. Like when it went into the very CG, like going through all the, when the world was expanded with the CG, yes, it added depth, but I think it took away from the grittiness of the used future. I think the practical sets brought that out, but I think the CG, at least personally, took that away a bit.
Yeah, totally fair. Totally fair. I mean, George Lucas and added CGI. It's a tough story as part of cinema history. As far as the ending, or most of the practical car chase scenes, I think it's kind of interesting. They were able to film. So this was when the BART system in the Bay Area was being built. They shot all those chase sequences in the unfinished BART tunnels. And in fact, when he's climbing that ladder to escape into the real world, those were just construction rebar that was flat on the ground. So what they did was to make it look like he was climbing up a tunnel, they tilted the camera on its axis and just had Robert Duvall crawl along those rebar things. And it really looks like he's climbing out of a giant tunnel. Or just a brilliant little camera choice by George Lucas that really sells that whole effect. Okay, guys, I'm going to keep this kind of brief because I know it's really, really late tonight. I want to just finish this up by saying, I really think that this movie, watching this movie and watching it with you all in this theater, I can't help but find it to be a bittersweet experience. It's sweet in the sense that we get to watch this movie when you see this young artist who's just so obviously brimming with talent. And he's just putting it all out there, heart on his sleeve. And the fact that we have this movie with that kind of enthusiasm, it fills my heart with so much joy. I really, really love to see it. And there is nothing like this movie. And anytime you find a movie where there is just nothing like it, it automatically makes it truly extraordinary. The bitter part is that he was so hurt by the way this movie was received that he never made it again. And look, obviously, because of this, we get The Godfather, we get Star Wars, we get all these incredible films. But I can't help but wonder if this film was more embraced, was more nurtured, how many other sort of incredible masterpieces from George Lucas could we have gotten? How much more encouraged could he have been to try to push the envelope, tell challenging, artistically driven stories? And how much did we miss out on in a path of history that we will just never know the outcome of? Ultimately, I'm so happy that this film exists, and I'm so glad that you came out tonight and watched it. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Be sure to come back in mid-November. We'll be playing John Cassavetes' opening night. Thank you so much.
Is George Lucas underrated or overrated?
I think after this, kind of underrated in a way. I thought that sounds weird. So I'm not really a big Star Wars guy at all, but I thought this was really cool.
I'd say underrated in terms of this for sure. I've always been a Star Wars fan, but when I ran into THX when I was younger, I was like, he's a completely different caliber than I thought.
If his career were just films like this all the time, it'd be totally different.
What were you doing when you were 25?
I don't remember. I have no idea.
Funny enough, I was about to start working on AI.
Do you feel like his other movies should be hornier or less hornier based on this?
Horniness is a weird word. The sexual dynamics in Star Wars versus this are very, very different. I think this is more about the tension and what's forbidden, not necessarily because it's known.
Did you guys like the movie? You thought it was fantastic.
It was amazing. It was great.
Really?
Another great choice. Behind the Slate never misses.
Do you mean that?
I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
You sound so sleepy.
Oh, I am sleepy, but
I'm
I mean
sleepy
it.
too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And cut.